Hello, welcome to the F-Rated podcast. I'm Anand, journalist and podcaster.
And I'm Holly Tarquini, the founder of the F Rating. The F is for feminist, and of course that is intersectional feminist. And the aim of the rating is to amplify films directed and or written by women, which is what we're aiming to do in this podcast. In each episode, we bring you a feminist chat with top women working in various aspects of the UK film industry.
Now, we didn't have the luxury of our own composer for the music in this podcast. In fact, now's probably a good time to give a shout out to the lovely person who offered up this music. It's a track called Nature Calls by Alexi. And in today's podcast, we're delving into the world of film music.
Yes, and interestingly, although the F rating is for films that are directed and or written by women, female film composers are even rarer than writers and directors on other feature films.
Wow. And the woman we've got today is a massive award winner. She's both phenomenally successful, prolific, a woman of color, and incredibly candid about what it's like to be in that world and both to work with other women and work across the planet in all kinds of different productions.
Yeah. And before we welcome her, we would like to ask a favour of you. If you could help us, please, by liking, sharing and hopefully writing glorious reviews of this podcast, it would really help. We want to amplify all of these women's stories. So yes, do please spread the word.
Well, today we're speaking to Nainita Desai. Nainita composed the music for the 2020 Oscar-nominated Bafta and Cannes winning feature For Sama about the Syrian war. She's also the composer for the Sundance 2020 winning feature The Reason I Jump about autism, and Boy Billionaires, the #1 Netflix series in India, a 4-part series on the rise of 4 different business tycoons and their fall. So welcome, Nainita. That's just a small sample of what you've done, but thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's lovely to talk to you. Thank you, Anu and Holly.
One question we always ask our guests is, tell us what your job is. What does a composer actually do, both in the big sense of the film and the day-to-day?
So in terms of the big sense of the film, as like a film director is telling a story through the script and the characters and the acting, and taking the viewer on an emotional experiential journey, I'm kind of doing the same thing myself. I'm a filmmaker in very loose words as well, but I tell stories through music. So I want to take the viewer on that emotional journey. So as a composer, I work very closely with the director and the editor. I'm working mainly in post-production, through the post-production process intensely, but I do get brought on quite early on as well, even sometimes while they're writing a script or just, before pre-production, so that I can experiment and write ideas. And I have my own recording studio at home. Most composers do work from their own home studios, and I have a room full of equipment and computers, as you can see.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, for people listening who maybe won't see what we're seeing right now, you've got a number of stringed instruments behind you, 7 or 8 from all over the world.
Yeah, I have a collection of world music instruments that I pluck and bang and scrape to create noises out of. But I also have my main computer. I have a lot of keyboards and synthesizers and all sorts of other tools. They're just tools. And everything I compose is composed into the computer. I play everything. But the most joyous part of my job is when I collaborate with other musicians as well. Players who bring my music to life. So if I'm lucky enough to, at the end of a project, before I deliver all the music, depending on the budget, I will go to a big recording studio like Abbey Road or Air Studios and record with live players, which is a wonderful moment for a composer. And for directors as well, I get my directors to come to the sessions, and I've just finished a film which I recorded at Abbey Road a couple of months ago, and the director came and his jaw had dropped to the ground, and it's a great way of getting a director on side and for them to experience another aspect of the filmmaking process.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that with directors. So I used to make documentaries for television, which is a completely different world. But at one point I was asking a composer to compose me some music for frightening tank music. I was asking for World War II, and I found it really difficult to express what I wanted because I'm not musically literate. How do you have those conversations with directors?
You've hit the nail on the head there, Holly. With that's the crux of what I have to do as a composer. Is it's kind of like being a psychologist, having to read people's minds. I don't expect my director or editor to speak in terms of music. I always say, talk to me in terms of emotion and story and what you're trying to achieve story-wise and emotionally, because it's my job to translate the story into music. Some directors are very, very specific. They know exactly what they want in terms of style of music. So we'll create playlists. I will give my director ideas, tangible ideas as pieces of music. I'll create a musical mood board and say, look, here's some tense music here for this section. Here's some epic, heroic music here for this part of the film, possibly. And they will do the same. They'll go through Spotify or Apple and create a mood board, and that will give me a great idea of the kind of tone, and also I'm very influenced visually. If you put visuals in front of me, I've just finished a Netflix series for John Dower and Lightbox. It's called Sophie, a Murder in West Cork, and it's based on it's a true crime based on a murder that happened 25 years ago in Ireland. And the director, John Dowers, gave me his treatment and visual mood board, and that was fantastic because it gave me this dark, gritty, bleached out look at the way he was going to film it, and all those kinds of, that information really seeps into me and I absorb it. When I see those kinds of images, music comes into my mind instantly.
Nainita, can I ask you a question? I love, Holly, your description. What was it? Angry, threatening tank music?
I think I was asking for frightening tank music.
Okay, but so and I know, Nainita, you've done you've done everything from nature documentaries, as you say, to documentaries, true crime, etc. What other phrases like that do you get from directors? Like, frightening tank music, proud alligator music. I don't know, what else do you hear?
Well, I did a commercial once. It was hilarious, and the director said, "Can you make it more lemony, please?" or make it more yellow, Okay. Okay, I thought, okay. And actually, I think when he said lemony, he meant give it a bit more zest and edginess to it. He's trying to translate a fruit, a citrus fruit into music. So those are the kinds of things that I'm taking on board.
So clearly in your work, there's huge amounts of different skills and different influences. And what we're really interested in is your personal and professional journey and how all these things come together. So tell me about music and when that became a part of your life and in what way? Because you're the child, like me, of Indian immigrants. So I'm imagining the palette was quite large.
Yes, so I was born and brought up in London. And I guess I'm a second generation British Asian. And at primary school, I went to a Church of England school, and I was actually immersed in music there because I was given free music lessons. I learned the violin and the piano, and I was in the school orchestra, and so I wanted to be a singer. When I was 10 years old, I wanted to be Barbara Streisand, and I sang in school choirs and so on. And at home, I was brought up as a Hindu. So on Sundays, I went to the Hindu temple, and my mother was very much into the arts and music, and she forced me to learn to play the sitar. And I was always very just open and receptive to all different styles of music, from jazz to classical to pop. By your Sunday afternoons, I used to listen to the top 40 and make my own mix playlists up and on cassette. And I went to the Bollywood movies. Once a week I used to go to the local cinema. and there'd be a huge congregation of hundreds of members of the Asian community. So I used to go to Bollywood movies and have to sort of sit through a 3-hour musical and listening to all those songs, and the melodies are what really captivated me. And then I watched Doctor Who, and I love, all the science fiction, and my dad used to take me to the pictures, and used to go and watch the Bond movies. So that was interesting. And then at home, we bought a turntable, and I used to go, my mother took me to the Harrods Records department sale once, and we used to buy all these old cheap vinyl LPs of 50 pence for a big, soundtrack. And we used to buy all this music, and it was so different, John Barry film soundtracks. And then at school, I was writing songs. I was into Joni Mitchell and Kate Bush and Barbra Streisand and, the Beatles and all these bands in the 80s and the 90s. So it was a very, very eclectic background in musically. And then as a teenager, I was a bit of a geek. I was a bit of a tomboy, and I loved computers. I was into computer programming and playing video games. And also having the pressures of feeling I needed to conform to my social and cultural pressures, I ended up doing a degree in mathematics. But I never thought that having a career in the arts or the film or music industry was something that I could actually take on as a career. I kind of had that imposter syndrome or felt insecure in myself. And so I did a degree in maths, and then from that I did a postgrad in music technology. And I was really into recording and buying equipment and doing multi-track recording and playing with microphones and so on, and playing around, writing my own tunes and my own little bits of music.
Did you absorb, do you think, two sets of cultural values, two sets of gender values and stereotypes, given that you were straddling those two cultures?
Yes, I did have that dichotomy, that dilemma of, being brought up in the West and then having these traditional cultural values as well. And I guess I'm very lucky in that my parents were never truly strict or I've always taken on these Asian values of this incredible work ethic. I work incredibly hard. And I guess this generation of Asians that came to Britain in the 60s, 70s, 80s and so on, they had to work hard and study. Whatever I did, I felt that I was under pressure to succeed at. And also being a woman, I was always a bit of an outsider. At home, I was an outsider because I was into all this Western stuff. And at school, I was an outsider because they were very... I did have sort of Asian friends, but everyone would conform. And I was under pressure to conform. And I thought, I can't do that. I have to be true to myself and my creative ambitions and aspirations. So on the one hand, I kept my family and my peers happy by having a degree in maths, but inside I was thinking I have to do what I want to do. And I gave myself a 5-year plan to work in the music and film industry, and I never looked back. I never got a real job. But being a composer, I had virtually no female role models, and that was challenging for me because there's this kind of motto I've had where I don't look at myself from the outside in. I look at myself from the inside out. I can't see how people are looking at me. I can't see, the fact that I've got brown skin or that I'm a woman. And I've never let that stop me. I just think I am what I am. This is what I want to do. I just want to go out and do it. I think looking back, I think it may well have taken me a little bit longer to get to where I am because I'm a woman. And I've always felt that I had to work extra hard, prove myself. I looked up to old white dead men.
Well, as we all do in so many different arenas.
Do you think, Nainita, that having felt like an outsider through school, that actually helped going into an industry? Because I don't know if everybody listening knows, but there are probably even fewer female composers in film than there are, say, directors, even directors of photography. There are so few women composing for film.
Yes, I mean, this industry is made up of a series of misfits, isn't it? I mean, you have to be a little bit crazy to an individual. Being unique and individual does have its advantages because now people value that. People value people from different perspectives, different backgrounds. I think it just creates for a richer, more diverse, a richer industry and a richer culture. It's interesting, that only in the last 5 years I've seen a change, a real strong change, where we are seeing many more female composers now coming through. And that's really heartening. Though I must say that it's that there is a negativity to it as well, because I've worked as a sound designer. They're all very male dominated professions, and so I was the only girl, and I felt this kind of pressure to fit in and to be one of the boys, and so I feel comfortable around men. But conversely, I didn't really know what it was like to work with other women until recently, in terms of other female directors and producers. I tended to be employed by male directors. I'm working on a few projects where they're all female women teams. And it sort of dawned on me only recently. I thought, oh, this is so lovely. This is just because I can just chill and relax and be yourself. I didn't realize what it was like to work with men until I worked with women recently.
That's interesting because one of the themes that we've explored with many of our guests is, female solidarity. Is there solidarity, or when you have women working together, actually does it sort of slightly pit women against women?
Both of those things, actually. The solidarity is there. There is this camaraderie. You can joke around. You can joke about men, but I mean, it's fun and it's more relaxed, and women can talk about having their periods and not feeling, say, oh God, I'm having a rotten day today because of my period, but I would never dream of speaking like that with a man. But the other side also happens, as you pointed out, that there is this competition, not so much now, but in the early days, if I came across the odd female director or the odd female editor, there is this kind of competition just because of your gender, feeling that's not aimed at me personally, but I sense it from female directors having to assert themselves within the team environment and working with other male executive producers and so on. And that's I pick up those vibes, and that tension is there. And also with other female composers, sadly, I sense, we fall into two camps. There's the solidarity, but then there's also that they feel threatened by other female composers as well. And yet they don't feel threatened by other male composers, which is so funny.
I think it's also because there have historically been so few women composers that there is probably the fear of, oh my God, there can only be 5. And if there are 2 of us, then I've got to kind of overthrow you. So I think often that competition, I don't believe, though I could be wrong, that it's innate. I think it is because of the situation. Like lots of female directors that say that they've tried to get things commissioned and the BBC have said, oh no, we've got a woman's series at the moment, as though you can only have one a year, or we've got a female comedian, we can only have the one.
Yes, you're so right. Other female directors have said that to me. So, well, I was told that I can only, we've already got a project like that, or we've already got a female director within the company. We don't want any more. We don't need any more. We're up to our eyeballs. But I'm having sort of exec producers coming up to me saying, oh, do you know any female editors? Do you know any more really cool, happening female directors? And I've had 2 or 3 companies, filmmakers that I'm working with, asking me those questions.
So just going back to your journey, Nainita, what was the big break? You studied maths, you were a techie, you loved music, but what got you into composing and music and film?
Well, because I was techie and I was really into sound, I got a scholarship to go to the National Film and Television School, and I studied sound design. And and I became a sound designer on feature films. So I worked with Bernardo Bertolucci and Werner Herzog. I worked in Germany for a year, and so I had a lot of experience working as part of big teams, and it gave me a great foundation in learning how to communicate with people, how to work in teams, what people do in post-production. You know, I learned about post-production and the audio side of things. So that was fantastic, but it wasn't quite creative enough for me. So I ended up giving it all up. Peter Gabriel had come to my university a couple of years ago, previously, and I got introduced to him at university, and he said, "Oh, this is really interesting work you're doing, Nainita, you know, this project and that project. Look me up when you finish your degree." Of course, I didn't, because I went into the film industry as in sound. And then I was just becoming frustrated, creatively frustrated, and I thought, I need to get into music. This is my real passion. So I remembered what Peter had said, and I wrote him a handwritten letter to Real World in Box, just outside Bath, which is where he's based with his wonderful recording studio complex. And I got a reply back, a phone call. It said, "We got your letter, Nainita. Would you like to come down and visit us?" So, and I'd always been a huge fan of Peter and his music and world music and all of that, since growing up. So off I trottled to Real World Studios, and they offered me a job on the spot to be Peter Gabriel's assistant music engineer. So that was a fantastic, gave me a really great grounding in working with music engineers, producers, working with artists and musicians, and it was a wonderful experience. And then I was frustrated with working on other people's music. I wanted to work on my own music. And I met this music supervisor at Real World, and he offered me a job and said, "Look, Nainita, I know you want to compose. Would you like to write the music for a travel adventure show that I'm supervising? It's called the Lonely Planet Travel Show, which is based on the Lonely Planet guidebooks. And it was for Channel 4. And so I took it on. I was thrown in at the deep end, it was baptism by fire. And I taught myself how to write music, staying up all day and all night, how to write to picture, how to hit points on the screen when something happens, the music has to respond. And I must have done something right, because I got offered another job for the same company, and it just grew from that. And 20 years later, sort of having written lots and music for lots and lots of different projects.
So Holly and I really want to talk about those projects. Let's talk about, first of all, For Sama. And for those who haven't seen it, this is a stunning, harrowing documentary film. It was shot by the Syrian journalist and filmmaker Wad al-Khatib through 5 years of the uprising in Aleppo, where she was living. Through the film, she falls in love, she gets married, she gives birth to a little girl called Sama, and this is all while barrel bombs and mortars and shells are destroying everything around them. It's also mostly set in the hospital that her husband, who is a doctor, has set up to treat the wounded. I mean, absolutely the most harrowing thing I've ever seen, but also so full of humanity. I mean, death, joy, laughter, hope, danger, despair. So talk a little bit about For Sama. I mean, the real world sound in that film plays a massive role. The sound of birds in the sky occasionally with fighter planes, or the sound of bombs dropping, the sound of a baby in the midst of this horror. So how did the music fit into that?
Well, it was a long journey. I think I was involved in the film for about 18 months. We were editing for about 18 months, which is exceptionally long. That was never the intention. It was meant to be a 1-hour documentary for Channel 4, and it just grew and grew and grew. And I got brought on very much at the beginning of the edit. I had a conversations with Ed Watts, the co-director, and the brief originally was to write a very sort of rich Hollywood drama thriller kind of war movie kind of score, orchestral with contemporary elements, a bit like Catherine Bigelow's Zero Dark 30 kind of feel. This is a Syrian uprising, the revolution, the Syrian war, and so on. And so I wrote about 80 themes over the first 12 weeks of the edit. and they were working with it, and it was fine. And then there was a pause in the edit after the first 3 months, and things were not quite gelling, and the film hadn't quite found its own voice and its own narrative. And because it is an archive-based film, with 500 hours worth of home footage, it had to find its voice. You can make 500 films out of that 500 hours. There's a huge task at hand to craft a narrative out of the material. And so the decision was made to turn this into a film that was much more intimate. What is this film actually about? At heart, it's about the relationship between a mother and a daughter against this epic backdrop. And when that decision was made and that narrative spine was, decided upon, the music that I had written no longer worked because it was too big and too rich and too epic. So we started paring things right back and make it much more minimalist. And one decision I made was to bring in this, for me, authenticity is incredibly important when scoring, for me to find the true heart of a film through the music. And so I brought in this musician who's a Syrian refugee, who's also a violinist. And I didn't want this clean, classical, pure violin. I wanted the sound that he made on his instrument was had a rough, raw edge to it, had a visceral quality to it. It was almost echoed and mirrored the crumbling city of Aleppo around you that you see in the film. His playing was like the beating heart of Aleppo. The two most powerful scenes in the film are where you have this baby being born via caesarean birth, and these two boys are bringing in their third brother who is dead into the hospital. And we had music over those scenes originally, and then we looked at them and thought, why do we have music here? We took away the music and the scenes became much more powerful without music. You're using silence to create greater impact.
Even thinking about For Summer, I start crying, and your music is such a massive part of it. It felt so unarrogant.
It's very interesting you use the word arrogant, because as a composer, you want to show off what you can do. Okay, well, look, hey, I can write a big piece of music here. I can write a huge score, and look what I can do, And the hardest thing is actually to hold back.
And another film that you've done that's very, very different in terms of the way that sound is used is The Reason I Jump. This is based on a best-selling book by Naoki Higashida, who wrote it at the age of 13. He's non-speaking and autistic. And it's about his experiences and the experiences of others like him around the world. And the idea is to create for those of us who are non-neurodiverse this overwhelming, joyful, sensory experience of what it's like to be them. There's music and there's sound. You're using much more of it in this film than you do in For Summer.
With this film, I did a lot of research. I love doing research and trying to find the heart of a film. One obvious thing is that the contributors in the film are non-verbal, they're non-speaking. So I wanted to give them a musical voice. So I did things like I took key phrases from the English translation, translated them back into the Japanese original, and then broke these key phrases and words into their vowels and consonants and syllables, and then I sang them in the score. You hear bits of vocals actually and singing in the score itself. And so that's me singing these kind of words in a broken, fragmented way. Neurotypical people like you or I will walk into a room full of people and see the whole, and then focus in on details. Whereas with some autistic people, it's the opposite for them. So it was like taking little fragments of sounds, little elements, and then piecing them together slowly like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle coming together. Another thing, in terms of authenticity, I brought in a cellist who's Elizabeth Wicklander. She's a cellist with the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and she's autistic herself. And she's a cultural ambassador for the National Autistic Society in the UK. So her contribution, where she plays the cello on the film, was incredibly moving and powerful and very personal. So, you know, authenticity and being true to the story and integrity is so important for me.
It was brilliant. But your next project is incredibly different. So you, I believe at the moment, are you composing for Ms. Marvel, which I'm very, very excited about?
Yes, I can't say very much about it at the moment. But it's funny because through my whole career, I've tried to avoid being typecast. You know, because I'm Asian and I'm a woman, over the years I've tended to be offered sort of Asian-based projects. And I've worked very, very hard to avoid being stereotyped, because I write Western music and I have so many different musical influences, and I don't want to be pigeonholed and be put into that box. So when I do take on an Asian-related project, it has to be something that I feel I can make a unique creative contribution to. And this project came up, and I just thought, yes. You know, when I was growing up, I had no female role models, and Asian female role models. And
Nainita, just to say,
yes.
for those who don't know
Yes.
about Miss Marvel, don't know if it will presumably be out, but this is an upcoming American TV miniseries streaming for Disney Plus, and it's based on a Muslim,
yes,
South Asian,
yes,
superhero
yes,
character, a woman.
Yes.
So that's what's exciting about it.
Yes, sorry, I didn't explain myself, but
that's all right.
It's the first Asian Muslim South Asian female superhero, and you know, and if for the 7, 8, 9, 10 teenage girls out there, this is a huge deal. You know, if I'd had that kind of role model when I was young, I would have just embraced it with all my arms. And I think it's so important, and so for me it's incredibly important, and whether it's a success or not is irrelevant. It's a great project to be a part of. It's super exciting, and it's fun, and I can't say anything more than that, but I think it's incredibly symbolic, and I hope that what Marvel are doing is, you know, creating the next generation of superheroes, and that's really, really refreshing and exciting.
And it's written by Bisha K. Ali, who I absolutely love. She is the best thing about Guilty Feminist Podcast, and her work is genius.
She is fantastic, and we've spoken, and she's just such a wonderful human being. She's, I think what she's doing is amazing. The one positive that's come out of the pandemic is that we're all communicating via Zoom and on the internet, and for me, in my profession, it's made the world a much smaller place where I can work on stories from all over the world, and I'm working on projects that are more US based now in New York and LA, and for example, the Marvel series I doubt that would ever have happened had we not had the pandemic, because the teams went, oh, we can employ composers from anywhere. So the playing field has been leveled.
You've worked in everything from games to series to ads to Meghan and Harry's theme tune to films, documentaries, drama, superheroes. What advice would you give to your younger self if you were looking back down the years? What would you like to say?
Oh gosh, there's so much. Learn to read and write music, because I can't actually, technically I can't. I don't have a formal education in music, but on a less technical level, having that faith, listening to your inner voice, and going for your dreams, working incredibly hard, and perseverance and tenacity. Go for it. Be the kind of person that people want to have around, you know, and your passion has to ooze sort of enthusiasm and passion, and it will show, and people will respond and pick up on that. So, yeah, I suffered from imposter syndrome. And it took me a while to have that self-confidence and to listen to my inner voice. And I think that's really important.
Well, your passion and enthusiasm has certainly come through today. So, Nainita Desai, thank you so much for making this time to talk to us.
Thank you, Nainita.
Thank you so much, Anu and Holly. Thank you very much.
I love her. She's just a masterclass in directing your talents in a way that the limits of other people, of the industry, don't curtail what you have to offer. So I just thought that was really inspiring.
Yeah, amazing. And I completely empathise with the looking up to dead white men. I spent my whole childhood looking up to dead white men and live white men, actually.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it, listening back, because of course when we recorded this with Nainita, Miss Marble was, it was still a big secret. And of course, my gosh, it's been phenomenal. Total favourite in this household.
Yeah.
So that was a real treat.
Next week, we've got a huge treat for you, a director who has won 17 major awards. So if you're a fan of The Crown or Call the Midwife, you will definitely want to tune in, because Philippa Lothorpe will be speaking to us.
Thank you so much for listening. Join us again next week, and please share, subscribe, rate this episode and others if you are enjoying it. Thanks a lot.